Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. Today's topic is on education, especially third grade reading proficiency and literacy. My name is Sharonda Witter and I am the manager of NCCAP, and we're thrilled to have you participate today. If you experience any kind of technical difficulties or delays, it may be necessary to try to close out some of the other programs running on your computer. If those technical difficulties persist, please keep this number handy. You can call in utilizing the meeting ID and listen to us live. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns during the webinar, please type those into our question and answer chat window, and we'll be monitoring it throughout the duration of today's webinar. So on the agenda today, we're excited to have a full plethora of experts sharing insight with us today. Starting up, we have Abby Whitford from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, who will share insight on Read to Achieve and what North Carolina is doing as a state. Next up, we'll have Ginger Young from Book Harvest in Durham share insight on the campaign for grade level reading for our state. Next up, we'll have Rachel Stein, also from Book Harvest, share on some of the specific strategies that Durham is utilizing through the efforts at Book Harvest. And last but not least, we will have Dr. Monroe Richardson join us from Charlotte to discuss what they're doing through their organization, Read Charlotte. And at the end of the webinar, we will answer any questions that you guys pose throughout the duration of the webinar. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with Abby Whitford from DPI.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited to be here to share with you about Read to Achieve and our reading camps. And I am the K-3 literacy consultant for the department, and I serve the Northeast region. Every child reading to achieve. That is the goal of educators, parents, the business community, faith-based organizations, and other stakeholders across North Carolina. Read to Achieve is not just about third grade, it is about reading proficiency for all students. 720. For a student entering kindergarten in North Carolina, that is a pretty important number. This number represents the days of literacy instruction that a kindergarten student has until the end of third grade. When you think about all of that time and number of days, it doesn't seem like much. Factor in teacher absences, student sickness, early dismissals, and precious instructional time is lost. So remember, 720. How can we all make the most of those 720 days for our youngest learners in North Carolina? The state goal is to ensure that every student reads at or above grade level by the end of third grade and continue to progress in reading proficiency so that he or she can read, comprehend, integrate, and apply complex text needed for secondary education and career success. As you can see, the goal of the state encompasses all grade levels K through 12. Let's look at the purpose of Read to Achieve. The General Assembly created this law so that students with difficulty in reading development are identified as early as possible using a formative diagnostic reading assessment where the classroom teacher sits with each child individually and observes and listens to the student read. The child's reading behaviors and errors are noted so that individualized instructional supports and services are intentionally planned for each student. The legislation also provides for extended learning opportunities and reading camps to provide additional instructional support for students that have reading deficiencies. Parents play a huge part in student achievement, and part of the legislation is that parents are continuously informed of their child's needs and progress. Community stakeholders also play an important role. The legislation encourages partnerships with community organizations, businesses, and other groups to provide volunteers, mentors, tutors to assist with reading and instructional supports for students. There are 7 components in the Read to Achieve legislation passed by the General Assembly in 2012. The K-3 Literacy Division is responsible for the implementation of 6 of the 7 components. All 6 of those components were implemented beginning with the 2013 school year. We had to hit the ground running as there was much work to be done quickly for the children of North Carolina. The one component that the K-3 Literacy Division is not responsible for is the kindergarten entry assessment. This component has been developed by the Office of Early Learning and was fully implemented for all domains of learning and constructs in the 2016-17 school year. Reading camps are a part of the component Successful Reading Development for Retained Students process. Reading camps are planned and provided by the district. Some districts plan a variety of strategies and activities that incorporate a camp or summer theme. At reading camp, students receive instruction tailored to meet their needs based on the data from the formative diagnostic reading assessment, as well as observed recording reading behaviors. Reading camp is an opportunity for students to work in a smaller group of children over at least 3 weeks with a total of 72 hours of reading instruction as required by the Read to Achieve legislation. In the summer of 2016, students in 1st and 2nd grade were also invited to attend reading camps to provide instruction on comprehension and foundational skills for these students. Part of the Read to Achieve legislation also encourages local education agencies to partner with community organizations, businesses, and other groups to provide volunteers, tutors, and mentors. During reading camp, many civic and faith-based organizations provide services such as after-camp childcare or mentors to students. These community partners are vital to the reading development of our students. Businesses can provide opportunities for parents to volunteer in their child's school to gain insight into specific strategies to work with their child at home. Partnerships for after-school programs provide one more opportunity for a child to read to a volunteer or mentor. In the picture, a school resource officer in our state reads with students after school and also serves as a mentor to students without a father figure in the home. This officer works with these students each week. This type of partnership lets students know that many people are present for them, that someone is crazy about them and cares about their future. During reading camps and other extended learning opportunities, the North Carolina Standard Course of Study is followed. The 5 main areas are foundational skills, writing, comprehension, speaking and listening, and language. Students in each grade level are taught grade level skills using developmentally appropriate practices. Instruction is based on data from the formative diagnostic reading assessment. This may include for kindergarten or 1st graders the use of magnetic letters or letter tiles, puzzles, and matching activities. 2nd and 3rd graders may work on writing in response to a science experiment they have done or syllable sorts. Teachers and after-school providers can work with students by listening to them read and working on those foundational skills. Opportunities are also given for students to talk with their peers about what they have read. Students' oral language development is a precursor to phonemic awareness, phonics instruction, and reading. Oral language development is key to reading proficiency. One of the most important things a teacher or after-school provider can do to build reading proficiency in students is to read aloud to children every day. This helps to expand their vocabulary content in other areas, as well as Tier 2 words. Reading aloud also provides opportunities for students to hear a fluent reader read with phrasing and expression. Students build background knowledge in content areas and develop an understanding of story structure with a beginning, middle, and end. It also helps to build a love of reading by helping students to build a repertoire of favorite authors or genres. When reading aloud, it is also important to think aloud. This helps students understand the thought processes a good reader has as they read. As a proficient reader, we are constantly making and checking predictions, visualizing in our mind, reading between the lines to infer and gain further understanding of the text, as well as rereading parts to clarify meaning. When thinking aloud, it is important to read and know the text well before you read to students. Plan ahead what you will need to think aloud for the students. Post-it notes are helpful to use to plan for the think aloud. What does this look like for after-school providers? Choose texts that are of interest to your students. Quality text are those texts that are worthy of more than one read. In other words, a text that you can dig into to develop a deep understanding. As an example, if I am working on the standard Reading Literature 3.2, which is recounting the story, determining the central message or lesson, and explaining how it is conveyed through key details in the text, I might take a look at Lynn Cherry's The Great Kapok Tree. The author uses various rainforest animals to speak to the man with the axe as he sleeps in the forest. They give him various reasons as to why he shouldn't chop down the tree. The central message is that we must all work together to take care of our environment, and the supporting details are the effects of cutting down the trees as shared by the animals. The focus continues to be on the North Carolina Standard Course of Study as an extension of what is happening in the classroom. The K-3 Literacy Division has many resources for instruction during extended learning opportunities. If you Google North Carolina Read to Achieve LiveBinder, you will find resources related to the legislation and all of the components. While resources for instruction can be found in each tab, one tab is dedicated to literacy instruction. In this tab, you will find a list of professional development offerings from the K-3 Literacy Division, as well as demonstration videos, the Big Ideas in Beginning Reading LiveBinder with links to instructional strategies and online resources. Let's take a look at a couple of those resources that will be helpful for after-school providers. This is the Big Ideas in Beginning Reading LiveBinder. There are resources for each of the 5 basic early literacy skills. These resources include the activities from the Florida Center for Reading Research, online resources, and standards aligned to each of the literacy skills. This is a great resource for teachers, after-school providers, and parents alike. Let's look at a couple of examples from the LiveBinder. This is a phonics activity from the Florida Center for Reading Research. Many times, struggling readers have difficulty with decoding and encoding as well as chunking multisyllabic words. This activity provides practice for children to develop automaticity in this skill and can be used as an activity during after-school tutoring sessions. Comprehension is the goal of reading. Many times, students can word call, but do not always comprehend at the deepest level of understanding. The Big Ideas in Beginning Reading has resources to assist with comprehension. Inferencing or reading between the lines is difficult for most students, especially if they do not have background experiences. Inferencing requires that a student takes what they already know and combine that with what the text says. Fact and opinion, cause and effect, and character development are just a few of the many comprehension skills that children can learn during after-school programs using this as a resource. Text Project is a website that provides free resources for students, teachers, parents, and after-school providers, and is developed by Dr. Alfreda Hebert, a leading reading researcher. Let's take a closer look at this website. One of the tabs on her website is created for parents and tutors. Under this tab, you will find fluency interventions, comprehension guides, and a toolkit for tutoring. The goal of the toolkit for tutoring is to connect a student's oral language with written language. There are 12 4-page books with reader's theater and word cards to accompany each set. This is an awesome resource for after-school programs for beginning readers. As noted earlier, students need practice in developing comprehension skills, especially those students that have a reading deficiency. The comprehension guides developed by Reading Partners and Text Project are a great way for after-school providers to assist teachers in developing students' comprehension. Let's take a look at one of those guides. This guide provides direct instruction for the tutor to work with students in a particular skill. Providing this opportunity for students in an after-school program only reinforces what happens in the classroom. TextProject.org also has resources for teachers and education professionals that provide literacy instruction in each of the basic early literacy skills. These resources are also valuable to help after-school providers to use in their programs as well. Dr. Hebert has a list of read-alouds and their grade level appropriateness based on text complexity, vocabulary lessons, and student text. One of my favorites on this website are the FYI for Kids articles. These articles are written on varying levels of text complexity and can cover all content areas. Dr. Hebert has included a guide to share information about the text complexity of the articles. Here is an example. These articles are 1 page in length and come with a comprehension guide. Teachers or tutors can use these articles with small groups of students to develop informational text standards that are being taught in the classroom. Think Alouds and modeling of comprehension strategies can take place using the article in an after-school program. Tutors could read the article with the students and look for the main topic and supporting details, or have students read and write a summary of their learning. There are many ways that this resource can be used in an after-school program. The North Carolina Department of Public Instruction's K-3 Literacy Division has developed a LiveBinder that has information pertaining to the legislation and best practices for reading camps. Planning guides for districts, sample daily schedules, and information about instruction are included in the LiveBinder as a resource for districts as they plan and implement the reading camps. The K-3 Literacy Division at the Department of Public Instruction is boots on the ground. Our consultants are in schools assisting teachers, school administrators, and central office staff with literacy instruction each week throughout the year. We have developed over 33 professional development offerings dedicated to literacy instruction that is research-based and aligns to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. We are happy to provide professional development for after-school providers as we all work together to achieve reading proficiency for our youngest learners. We can also assist with the coordination of after-school staff and school teachers in planning to optimize the continued learning outside of the school day. This is an important link to make sure that kids make connections and build background of their learning outside of the classroom. The North Carolina Department of Public Instruction's K-3 Literacy Division is here to support district personnel, school administrators, teachers, parents, and most importantly, the children of North Carolina in literacy and reading proficiency. You can contact your State Board Region's K-3 Literacy Consultant for further information. Whether you are a teacher, a consultant with DPI, a parent, a community member, a business leader, or the pastor of a church, we are all here for the children of North Carolina. It could be students celebrating their successes in reading camp around the campfire in Dare County, or students in a reading camp performing readers theater in Halifax County, or students in Catawba County learning about math skills and teamwork. We all have one goal in mind, and that is that all children are reading to achieve. All students are reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here today. My name is Ginger Young, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Durham-based nonprofit Book Harvest, but I'm actually here today representing the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation to tell you about the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading and what is happening here in North Carolina with the campaign. You may know a little about the campaign because it's gotten quite big in our state. It is a collaborative effort by foundations. Hold on 1 second. Thank you. We're working on our slides here. Here we go. A collaborative effort by foundations, nonprofit partners, business leaders, government agencies, states, and communities across the nation with a singular goal to ensure that more children from low-income families are succeeding in school and graduating prepared for college, a career, and active citizenship. It uses 3rd grade reading proficiency as its focus, with the knowledge that reading proficiently in 3rd grade is heavily correlated with school success and graduation from high school. At the national level, let me back up. The national campaign launched its communities network in the year 2012 when it was still housed in the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which many of us know as the home for the Kids Count Data Center. It is a collaborative effort across communities that are participating to ensure that we can have a support network and a platform for success for 3rd grade reading in the communities that are participating. At the national level, there are more than 50 partner organizations such as First Book, Raising a Reader, Reach Out and Read, Parents as Teachers, Too Small to Fail, Strive, and many others that are supporting the campaign through consultations with communities, free books, streamlining opportunities, all sorts of support at the local level. These partner groups provide expertise and toolkits to the efforts going on at the ground at the local level. The national campaign has a 2020 goal that a dozen or more states will increase by at least 100% the number of children from low-income families reading grade level by the end of third grade. It's a pretty big goal. And let me tell you a little bit about what the campaign stands for. The campaign actually began in 2010 with a listening and learning tour to identify what the components needed to be able to ensure improved third grade reading proficiency in communities across our country. The launch of the Campaign Communities Network took place in 2012, and the original components of that launch still form the core of the campaign today. The campaign rests on 3 pillars. The first is school readiness, with the idea that too many children from low-income families begin school already far behind. There's a heavy emphasis on figuring out what it's going to take in each of our communities to ensure that every child arrives at kindergarten ready to learn. The second pillar is reducing chronic absence. Again, the knowledge that attendance matters a lot to school success and that too many children from low-income families miss too many days of school. The third pillar of the national campaign is summer learning. The campaign is very focused on finding out how we can stem summer learning loss with the knowledge that too many children from low-income families lose too much ground over the summer months. And I'm especially excited to be here today at the North Carolina Center for after school programs, which this work is working on this challenge every single day. And so that is a really nice way for us to think about that particular pillar of the campaign. And one of the realizations that we've had with the campaign from the early days is that no one can do it alone. It really does require collaboration from lots and lots of stakeholders, including and especially parents and families, nonprofits across the community, foundations and philanthropic investors, business leaders, government at all sorts of different levels, from school systems most obviously to libraries, mayors, economic development, housing authorities, and then of course we have to pay attention to policy, both local, state, and also the federal levels. And I would say that one of the things that's come out of the campaign as bright spots since 2012 has been the role that less conventional partners can play in this. We've had some wonderful bright spots emerge around barbershops, salons, laundromats, places where we can really do some important transformational community-based work that may not be on the obvious list of foundations and business leaders, but are really doing important work out there. Here's where the campaign is right now. From its humble origins in 2012, it now has more than 340 collaboratives across the country that have filed what's called a Community Solutions Action Plan, detailing how they are planning to improve the third grading reading proficiency scores in their communities and are working to make that become possible. The state leads are brought on due to the increase in the number of communities involved to provide state-level support to each of the communities doing this work. In North Carolina, the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation is the lead, and we're really proud of the fact that we now have 9 communities across our state who have signed on to be part of the Grade Level Reading Communities Network, with another 5 pending, and we believe those will be in the pipeline to bring us to a total of 14 communities in North Carolina that are in the campaign fairly soon. Just interestingly, the states with the most campaign communities are West Virginia with 55, Arizona with 25, and California with 20. And here's the good news. We are starting to see the needle moving across the nation. In 2016, 94 communities within the campaign network were able to report progress in at least one solution or grade level reading area. 31 of these communities reported progress in at least 2 of these solutions, 9 in all 3, and 49 communities reported progress on grade level reading. And again, I'll remind you of the 3 solution areas, the 3 pillars. There's school readiness, regular attendance, and summer learning. In North Carolina, we have some pretty big challenges. 38% of our 4th graders scored at or above reading proficiency in the year 2015. And if you look at it by demographics, we find that 25% of 4th graders from economically disadvantaged families scored at or above reading proficiency in 2015. That means that only 1 in 4 of those children has the proficiency they need to be successful in school. That is a pretty big red flag, and it's a sign that we have a lot of work to do, and it's imperative that we get it right. And it's urgent. We're facing a growing skills gap, and this has a very heavy workforce development component. By the year 2020, It's estimated that 67% of the jobs in the state will require some post-secondary education. The gap there is significant, with only 42% having that level of education today. And we believe firmly, both at the campaign nationally and in North Carolina, that grade level reading is achievable. And we have worked hard to come up with some specific focus areas to dig into in the work ahead, with the belief that each child can have the opportunity to be on track by third grade, aligning the work with state and local policies and practices rooted in brain science and child development. And some of these areas that the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation is spearheading and leading with our communities across the state are a focus on health and development on track beginning at birth. So really taking a hard look at what happens from the time we have newborns. Supported and supportive families and communities. High quality learning environments from birth all the way to age 8. And of course, regular attendance in early learning programs that take place even before school starts, and then in school as well. And here's what we have for the North Carolina campaign right now. You'll see on the left side of the slide the 9 campaign communities that are currently in the Communities Network. What I think is really terrific about this list is that it's 9 very different communities. Each of them brings its own set of stakeholders and strengths to the work to be done, even as we share we have a shared goal. Some of these are more urban. You see Wake Up and Read there for Wake County, or largely the Raleigh regional area. And then there's some very rural ones as well, such as Moore County. And we have a similar list of diverse communities looking to join the campaign in the short term, with letters of intent submitted in these 5 counties that you see mentioned here: Guilford, Pitt, Richmond, Orange, and Johnston counties. They will soon submit a community solution action plan to the campaign, detailing exactly what their work plan is to be able to transform outcomes for the children in their community around third grade reading. Let's take a look at an individual community that is already in the campaign. That would be one called Growing More Readers out of Moore County. Growing More Readers has within its county 16 partner organizations, all working toward this goal of transforming outcomes around third grade reading. Its local Smart Start office serves as the champion organization, the campaign lead, working to align and support the work of the other partners on the ground in the community. And the focus of this work, again, falls to the pillars of the campaign: school readiness, making sure kids arrive at kindergarten ready to learn, addressing summer learning and making sure that summer can be a time of enrichment rather than loss, attendance, parent awareness, getting parents involved in the work, and community investment. Growing More Readers in Moore County has done fantastic work so far, received the 2012 All-America City Award as a part of the campaign for grade level reading work it had done. And in 2015, it was recognized with a Pacesetter Award from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. So we're very proud of their work. We're learning a lot from them across the state and are really delighted at the work they're doing. Specifically, since we're here today looking especially at after school and summer learning time, we see that their summer learning project addressing the campaign pillar of summer learning has 7 collaborative organizations. They offer a lot of light touch and heavier lift opportunities for enrichment in the summer. And this is a really important example of where less than 50 students may be involved, and it points to the value of rural communities in really moving the needle where their kids live. Moore has shown impressive gains, with 88% of participating students maintaining or increasing their level of reading over the summer in the year 2015. I'd like to speak just for a moment about the role of North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation as the state lead. The role is to build capacity of the communities that are a part of this hard work, to really come up with collaborations that achieve measurable outcomes, to create, convene, and strengthen a learning community of the Communities Network, to share best practices, data, and resources. I'm always struck by how nobody needs to reinvent the wheel when there's so many great communities going ahead of us doing the work, and we have a lot to learn from each other. The NCCAP also provides strategic support and brokers access to technical assistance among the campaigns, which is enormously helpful. They develop tools for communities to adapt to promote understanding of birth-to-age child development work and the importance of grade level reading. They find ways to shine a light on and lift up community progress, and they're always working to recruit new communities and support them in thinking about their letter of intent and their action plan for submission to the national campaign. How can NCECF, as the state lead for North Carolina's campaign communities, work with the NC Center for After School Programs? It can connect you and your after-school work with NC campaign communities in your area. It can share resources on parent engagement, including a soon-to-be-released report on parent perspectives in North Carolina. And as part of a collaboration to support summer learning in the Triangle region and beyond, NCECF has been working with Book Harvest to create a summer learning toolkit in both English and Spanish that will soon be able to be shared. So again, the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation is driven by a bold and important vision that each North Carolina child have a strong foundation for lifelong health, education, and well-being, supported by the best birth to age 8 education system available, and to make that system as good as it can be. The mission of the Early Childhood Foundation is to marshal North Carolina's great people, ideas, and achievements to build a foundation of opportunity and success for every child in North Carolina by the end of 3rd grade. And if you want to learn more, which we encourage, please do reach out to Lisa Finaldi, who's the Community Engagement Leader at the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. And she has a lot of information, a lot of tools, a lot of connections, and is ready to work with change agents and hard literacy efforts across the state to help ensure that our children are reading proficiently in 3rd grade. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Stein, and I'm the Education Partnerships Manager at Book Harvest. Book Harvest is delighted to be serving as the co-lead with Durham's Partnership for Children for Durham's campaign for grade level reading. And I know you just learned a lot about the campaign for grade level reading. Our presentation today will focus on the work we are doing to address one of the 3 campaign pillars that you just learned about, and that pillar is summer learning. We have a specific strategy for transforming summer into a time of enrichment, and it's a book-based strategy. Before we get into the research of why we use this strategy, I want to tell you a story about the power of children and the power of books. As you can see in these 3 pictures on this slide, something was happening when this student selected this book on sharks. This student last spring was able to take a brand new string backpack and fill it with 10 books of his choice. As soon as he finished, he sat on the carpet looking at his books. What you can see in these pictures is his delight in discovering this book about sharks. He could not keep this excitement to himself and kept interrupting his neighbor, telling her about what sharks eat, how big they are, and how many teeth they have. Every time he read a fact in his book, he wanted to tell his neighbor. He had the opportunity to choose a book based on a content area he was already interested in, and he was extremely motivated to read his book and share his new knowledge. And this is what we want for students in the summer: time to practice their reading skills that they have worked on all school year. Yet for many of the students, once the year is over, they may not have books in their home, or they may not have access to the library. So we are asking them to do something without making sure they have the necessary tools. Research shows that access to books is critical. We know that access to books is a big barrier to literacy development, and if we can solve the problem of access, we will be on the road to realizing educational parity. We need to be intentional and strategic about improving the access children from low-income families have to books that they can and want to read. And from the statistic at the bottom of this slide, we learn that 80% of preschool and after-school programs serving low-income populations do not have age-appropriate books for their children. Book Harvest's response to this critical need is its Books on Break program. The research shows that books in the home are the biggest indicator of a child's academic success, as much or as even more than the parent's education, zip code, gender, or income. 61% of low-income families have no books at all in their homes for their children, and providing self-selected books for summer reading produces as much or more reading growth as attending summer school. For the poorest children, the effect of a summer book distribution is twice as large as attending summer school. And that is why we do Books on Break. Our Books on Break program at Book Harvest began in 2012, and we started at 2 programs. Last year, we were able to expand that program district-wide in Durham Public Schools so that all 30 schools were able to provide some books to their students. For our program, we shoot for every student to select 10 books, but we know that some schools might be able to provide fewer books. So however many books you are able to provide to your students, that will begin the process of helping them to continue their reading skills over the summer. It is one of the core values of Books on Break is that students choose their own books. Why? Worthy and McCool found that allowing students to make choices about their reading material increased the likelihood that they would engage more in reading. In addition, Guthrie and Wigfield suggest that providing genuine student choices increases effort and commitment to reading. And as you saw on the first slide with the student who picked the shark book, he was able to pick that and he was more motivated to read that book. And we see that happening over and over and over again during our Books on Breaks experiences. And what kinds of books do kids like? Well, kids have their own kid culture. Whether it's sports, activities, video games, computer games, TV shows, or movies, kids have their own preferences, and we strive to make sure there are plenty of books that are popular with kids. And if you think about it, think about the last book that you read. Was it a book that someone told you to read and it wasn't something that was interesting to you, or was it a book that you got to choose based on one of your own interests? We would like to invite you to consider how you can add a summer book giving component to what your program already offers. And because we feel so strongly in the power of this program, we have spent time creating a toolkit that we would like to share with you. It's available on our website, and you can click on this link, or you can go to our website. And it is very detailed and will walk you through the process of how to do your own type of program. It has instructions on how to partner with businesses, templates on how to run book drives, and how to set up a book selection experience for your students. And like I said before, it doesn't matter if you provide 1 book, 2 books, 5, or 10. Begin small and then grow it each year. But try to incorporate book giving into what you're already doing with your programming. And here is a picture from the toolkit. This is actually the beginning of it. This is what it looks like. So we've talked a lot about books and kids, but what about parents? We know that parents are essential when it comes to increasing summer learning. So at Book Harvest, we have created a Books on Break parent advisory team. This group of parents meets to help plan different aspects of the program. Last year, working with our partners at NCCAP, the parent advisory team created a summer texting program. And this year, they are working to create a communications toolkit. And as Ginger mentioned, once we complete this toolkit, we are happy to make it available to you. It will provide messages for parents that you can use to tell them about the importance of summer learning, and it will be in English and in Spanish. Another thing that we do at Book Harvest is we invite families to come to our office to select more books all summer long and throughout the school year. So if this is something you'd like to add to your programming, please get in touch with us. Here's my contact information. I would love to support you in any way that I can, and please feel free to check out our toolkit. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monroe Richardson. I am the Executive Director of Read Charlotte here in Mecklenburg County, and delighted to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to share with you just a little bit about what we do here in Read Charlotte, but mostly want to talk about third grade reading and some things that you are able to use in your own after or out of school programs. Next slide, please. So Read Charlotte is a 10-year initiative that coordinates, integrates, and aligns people, resources, and data to double third grade reading from proficiency from 39% in 2015 to 80% by 2025. We are not a program. We have lots of great programs here in Mecklenburg County. Our job is to really coordinate and align a lot of the work that's happening around the county so that we can significantly improve third grade reading outcomes. Next slide. Why third grade? Well, it really is a critical dividing line between learning to read and reading to learn. It really is the biggest predictor of how well children will do in school for the rest of their academic career. We know that virtually all children that are able to read well by the end of third grade will graduate on high school on time, about 90%. Unfortunately, children who are not able to read well by the end of third grade are 4 times more likely to drop out of school. To put our work a little bit in context for you, I want to share a little bit of data from the that will help both see what's happening here in Charlotte, but also in the state of North Carolina. Next slide, please. Although we're accustomed to looking at the North Carolina end of grade exam starting in third grade, the data I'm going to share are from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, also affectionately known as the Nation's Report Card. This has been given every year in our country since 1969, and often in reading and math, although in some other subjects, and importantly for us, it's given in 4th grade and 8th grade. We have these data both for Charlotte, Mecklenburg schools since 2003, and of course for the entire state of North Carolina. Although our average from the most recent NAEP assessment in 2015 was 39% of 4th graders reading significant gaps that exist in our district. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see that where we've got our goal of 80%, there is no group when we break them down by race and gender that are at 80% yet, but you can clearly see significant disparities that have persisted over time between white girls and boys, but then also Black girls, Black boys, Hispanic girls, and Hispanic boys. This is really the work of our community collectively to close the gaps and to raise the bar for all children. But this is not unique to Mecklenburg County. Next slide. This is what it looks like in the state of North Carolina. Same time periods, similar gaps. And what you can see is that the work of all of you is really important and has an opportunity to make a significant contribution to how our children in our state are doing in general. Next slide, please. In terms of what does it take to actually move the needle on these numbers? Well, there is a formula for success. This actually comes from our colleagues at the National Implementation Research Network, NERN, at UNC Chapel Hill, and kind of reformulated it for our purposes. But it really goes like this: effective practices and programs times effective implementation times supportive systems will get us to our third grade reading goal. And what I would submit to you is that one, none of the factors on the left-hand side of the equation can be zero, which means we have to pay attention to having great programs that are proven to work, implement it well, and making sure that our local systems are supportive so that those programs can reach their full potential. Next slide, please. We have organized all of the research that talks about the predictors of third grade reading proficiency from birth through third grade into what we call the reading success pathway. And all of the work that we do here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg is focused on making sure that we keep kids on the pathway. And when we work with our nonprofit partners, increasingly our work is focused around helping them understand where the children that they're serving in their programs are at, and helping them to target their efforts to make sure that they're getting kids back on the pathway. Any of you that happen to be in counties where the school district is using a reading diagnostic called iReady that is produced by Curriculum Associates, Your district already has really great data for children from kindergarten through 3rd grade that will tell you what specific skills they need help with on this pathway. Outside of districts using iReady, it's possible to also look at some of the other formative assessments like Dibble's measures that will also give you some information about various aspects of the pathway. But we really encourage out-of-school providers to have conversations with schools and school districts about the data that are already collected so that we can more effectively target interventions to help children. Next slide, please. Out of all of the steps of the pathway, there really are 2 key focal points for action. It's ABCs, or letter knowledge, and phonics. We've known from since 2000 from the National Reading Panel that the most important cognitive predictor of how well children will do in school when they start kindergarten, do in school in reading rather, is letter knowledge. Do they know their upper and lowercase letters, and do they know the sounds they make? Letter ID and letter sound correspondence. Children who are behind at the end of kindergarten and have not mastered this skill are most likely behind at the end of 1st grade when they should be learning phonics. The national data is that only about 12% of children who are behind at the end of 1st grade will get caught up by 3rd grade. So while there are lots of things that are important, and you heard earlier about fluency and comprehension, and all of those are important, if children fall off the reading success pathway early, it becomes really critical to get them back on so that we can give them the greatest chance they can have to be able to read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. We believe very much in research and data here at Reed Charlotte, and spent a lot of time last year really digging into a lot of research papers to understand what works. We have a very strong interest in evidence-based interventions, so we look for for research that has experimental studies that show that a group of children who got a certain intervention did better than a similar group that did not. That work actually yielded some interesting insights for us. Next slide, please. And these are our 5 buckets of based practices that we found. They are active reading, which I'll talk about more in a second, high quality structured tutoring, summer reading, including families in the process, and targeted skill instruction. There's really strong evidence behind all 5, and we intentionally look to support interventions that are impacting 2 or more of those buckets at one time. And then as we look at a portfolio of interventions, really look to impact all 5 of those buckets at once. Next slide. In terms of out-of-school strategies, what you have in front of you is something that's referred to as Scarborough's reading rope. And there are many strands that are woven into skilled reading. When you looked at that title and read that sentence, you did it automatically, right? You did it fluently. It didn't take much effort. It took a lot of work for you to get there, and your reading rope, if you will, is really tightly wound at this point. Well, that's where we need to get children to, and there are many strands that you can see in here, but they largely boil down into language comprehension and word recognition. And there really are 2 key strategies that out-of-school time providers can use and actually have an advantage compared to other groups where you can see children more frequently. The first one is active reading, and then the second is structured tutoring, which you'll recognize as 2 of the 5 buckets. Next slide, please. Active reading, earlier you heard, can we get the next slide, please? So earlier you heard reference to read aloud. And one of the things that we've known for a long time is that a particular way of reading with children, sometimes referred to as dialogic reading or interactive shared reading, there is so much evidence, experimental evidence, that it helps build children's language, vocabulary, and comprehension. But what we found was that although this has been studied over and over since the late 80s, no one had ever programmatized this to make it easy to teach families and reading buddies and reading mentors how to do this. So we worked on this. We partnered with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library to offer what we call active reading training. And active reading is defined by the ABCs, to ask open-ended questions, build vocabulary, and connect text to children's world. We piloted this with 100 families and library branches and with community partners in the first quarter of the year. And now with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, we're partnering with them to provide training for families of children ages 2 to 5, a 4-week workshop, but more importantly for out-of-school time providers, teaching reading buddies and reading mentors how to do active reading with kids in a way that can really help build their vocabulary, their comprehension, and their language skills. If you're interested in learning more about this and including a video that we have about this, you can go to the Read Charlotte website, and we've got a page on active reading. Next slide. The other thing that is really, I just think, uniquely positioned for out-of-school time providers is tutoring. And what we found in our research is that just putting an adult with a child who has not been trained, doesn't have the right resources, and doesn't receive ongoing support really doesn't make that much of an impact on children's reading development. And here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, our estimate is that in the 58 neediest schools in terms of improvement for reading performance, there are about 20,000 children from grades kindergarten to 3rd grade that could use some reading support. We estimate that there are probably about a couple thousand tutors at most of varying levels of quality. So we're partnering with with the United Way to develop what we've called Tutor Charlotte, which is intended to be an end-to-end solution to recruit, train, match, and coordinate literacy tutors and reading mentors, but also adding in math tutors, because we know kids also need that kind of support as well. Next slide. One of the things that I think is really important for all of you to know is that it is so critical to ask questions about the evidence for various interventions you may be thinking about. We've done a lot of work on this. We spent probably over 1,500 hours digging into hundreds of papers to identify interventions that could move children on specific outcomes related to the reading success pathway. What I can tell you is a lot of interventions have never been rigorously tested. There's been no experimental studies, kind of like what we would expect when new medicines are developed. And so we simply can't say whether a program is quote unquote proven to make a difference. However, we have found a set of interventions that do have evidence. And I think the thing to help put this in context for you is that the typical evidence-based intervention, when we kind of take effect sizes and standard deviations and kind of boil those down into plain English, the typical evidence-based literacy intervention for an elementary school kid will help 3 out of 100 kids have better outcomes than they would have compared to usual practice. If that strikes you as a low number, it is, and it really explains why there's no silver bullet, right? Sometimes people say there are silver BBs. So we use that as a benchmark to say what out there can do better than 3 out of 100. And we found a set of interventions that here in Charlotte, we are working intentionally with partners to stack and align so that more children have a fairer shot at being able to read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. There are 2 in particular, though, I would like to highlight for out-of-school providers that you might consider learning more about for your organizations. Next slide, please. The first one is a program called Sound Partners. This is targeted for children from grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. For those of you thinking about this in a response intervention, multi-tiered systems of support framework, this will be considered a Tier 2 intervention. It is designed specifically for use by tutors with minimal training and experience. So, trained volunteers or paraprofessionals. This is one of the best interventions that we found to help kids with what's known as, alphabetics, everything from letter knowledge through phonics. And if you remember that benchmark of typical intervention improving outcomes through 3 out of 100 kids, you can see the specific outcomes at the bottom of the slide where this intervention, while it's not a panacea, is significantly producing outcomes much greater than what we would typically see. One of the reasons I reference this one is that if you look at the dosage, it requires 30-minute sessions of one-to-one tutoring 4 days a week. Any program, out-of-school time provider that is touching kids that frequently, whether it's an after-school program or perhaps summer, has the opportunity to use Sound Partners as one of your portfolio of interventions. Unfortunately, if you're not working with kids as frequently, I don't know how well this could work if you don't have that amount of dosage. But in any event, wanted to share this as one takeaway for you to investigate. And then there's another one for kids who've mastered phonics but still need help with fluency or not yet fluent readers. And this is called HELPS. It is targeted for kids grades 1 to 4, really late first grade, kids who need help with phonics, all the way through fourth grade. There is some evidence it might even be able to help kids at later grades. But again, this is a tier 2 intervention. Interestingly, this was developed right here in our own state by John Baganey, who's a great researcher at North Carolina State University. This intervention actually is included in one of the What Works Clearinghouse's guides on how to improve K-3 reading comprehension. This is the most impactful intervention that we have seen for fluency and comprehension. It is a fluency intervention. I actually went through the training myself and was offered in Charlotte about 6 weeks ago. Again, this is designed to be used for volunteers. Parents have been trained to use this. The dosage is not a typo, 2 to 3 times a week for 10 to 12 minutes. I am really impressed with this intervention. And again, this is something that you could add into your existing programs for kids that you're able to identify who are able to sound out words but are still not fluent readers. I would highly recommend this. You can learn more at helpsprogram.org. That's helpsprogram.org about the HELPS intervention. I think that's my last slide. If you have any additional questions about Read Charlotte or anything that I've shared, you can find our contact information on our website and be very happy to answer your questions.
I'm unmuting you now. So you're unmuted. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. So we do have a couple of questions that you guys posed. So the first question is going to be for Book Harvest. I'm going to invite her to come back up. So where can after school and summer programs find books to share with children?
Thank you, Sharonda. I think there are 2 different ways to procure the books that are needed to make sure kids have book-rich homes in the summer. One way that we at Book Harvest have addressed this question is to crowdsource it, to say to our community, we need books so our kids can have books. And the response we have had has been overwhelming. We have children running book drives at their scout troops and their after-school programs. We have faith-based organizations running book drives, businesses, schools themselves. And so when you open up the challenge to your community, you may find, as we did, that there's plenty of people out there who understand the challenge and the need and who are willing to step up and run book drives and bring you their books to be able to share with the kids at the start of summer. There are also other great resources in the larger community of literacy that can help. The National Social Enterprise First Book has a First Book Marketplace which has books at significant discount. Same for Scholastic, which has some amazing book selections that nonprofit groups and schools can order books from. And if you look on the Book Harvest Toolkit that Rachel talked about earlier, you'll find a lot of resources about how to both run your book drive and how to identify sources of new books from partners out in the world who are doing the same work we're doing, trying to promote book access and book ownership for all our children.
Awesome. Thank you, Ginger. And our second and final question for today is in regards to reading camps that are offered by DPI. So the question is, how can after-school and summer programs encourage their youth to participate? And how can we partner with reading camps through our after-school programs?
We have a lot of partnerships throughout different districts, have different partnerships with various after-school providers that are around. And for example, Boys and Girls Clubs will provide after camp care for them. Some faith-based organizations provide snacks for students during that after-school camp care. So we have lots of ways. It's not a requirement that kids do come to reading camp, but it certainly is something that we are hoping that in this coming school year we can work with districts to have strategies in place to get more children there, because we do see that need. So thank you so much.
Well, that concludes our webinar today. We're excited that you all joined us. Our next webinar will begin in January. We're hoping to target the topic of economic development as it impacts our youth across the state. So stay tuned for more details regarding that. From NCCAP, we wish all of you a happy holidays and a happy new year.